Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about another group of people who changed the face of Pride forever in the community and is continually helping people in the community to live their best lives. Today we're going to be talking about the organization ACT UP. So in the summer of 1985, there was a man named Mike Petrillis who was living his life as a gay man in New York City. He was basically the person that you see in the movies in the 1980s. He found a job at an art gallery. He lived in a really hip part of New York. He went out with his friends every night having a great time. Then one day he looked down and he noticed a red splotch on his arm. He went to the doctor and they ran a bunch of tests and came back and they gave him the verdict: you have AIDS. They said that he'd be lucky if he survived 6 months, and he was only 26 years old. Of course, at this time, his initial reaction was he was distraught. It was a death sentence. And soon that sadness turned into anger and rage. He began to learn just how little the government cared and how little the medical establishments had done to quell this. And at the time it was something that mostly affected gay men. This was 4 years after AIDS had first made headlines in New York. At this time, more than 6,000 Americans had already died from AIDS, yet the budget for combating this disease was only a fraction of what the government was spending on disease and testing. The president at the time, Ronald Reagan, had still not even said the word AIDS in public, and there was only one pharmaceutical company who was seriously trying to combat the disease. Over the next decade, this rage brought other men together, thousands in fact, and supporters, and they came together to start ACT UP, which stands for AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. They ultimately forced the government and scientific community to fundamentally change the way medical research is conducted, paving the way for a discovery and treatment that today keeps alive estimated 500,000 HIV positive Americans and millions more worldwide. There was a lot of division in ACT UP because it was based on a lot of anger, and people in the coalition basically called it a war zone going to meetings. The gay and lesbian communities had created a dynamic network of self-help groups in response to the crisis, but their focus was providing comfort to the sick. Buddies to take you to the hospital, lawyers to help you write your will, and Petrillis remembers screaming at them that he didn't want lawyers to write his will. He was angry and he wanted to live. Whereas other people in the group said that they didn't want to go and picket the government. They didn't want policies to change. They didn't have time for it. They needed to help the sick that were around them. They needed to put people in diapers. They needed to bring people to the hospital. One part of the group wanted to politically radicalize and start rebellions in the streets and get policymakers to change, and the other just wanted to help the people who were already sick. But this was all temporary because they kept losing the people that they were trying to help. By early 1987, the US death toll was above 40,000, and worldwide HIV infections raised from 5 to 10 million. The threat was starting to feel apocalyptic, which I know that a lot of us felt this year with COVID-19. And finally, the gay community's anger boiled over. Hundreds of gay men and their supporters flooded the streets of New York to vent their anger. They had a demonstration on Wall Street, then they protested City Hall, then they had an even bigger protest down at Wall Street again. This was a bigger protest and picket line that a lot of people had seen by this time. They felt that this was definitely a different sort of rebellion. At the second Wall Street protest, hundreds of people were arrested. Many of them were people who didn't have any priors. It was really affirming for a lot of people because it showed that other people were angry and that we could use our voices to state our anger. Rallying together at the time was a really good replacement for just feeling scared all the time. It was a powerful feeling. It showed that they can do more than just go with people to the hospital or buy people groceries. They could change the way that they were living. Anger helped fight the sense of hopelessness in the community. With the New York demonstrations of ACT UP, more ACT UP groups started forming in different parts of the country. ACT UP quickly made its name by being unapologetically confrontational. ACT UP's ethos was basically that they had united in anger. It was a group that started out of anger. They would storm people's offices with fake blood and throw it on their computers to block them. They locked themselves at politicians' desks, and at one point they barged into a meeting at a pharmaceutical company and turned over the buffet that they were having. This made the group extremely intimidating. They were no longer invisible sufferers of a disease, they were terrifying sufferers of a disease. This all changed when ACT UP realized that they could use this anger strategically instead of running around with it and doing whatever came into their heads first. They wanted to be able to put anger towards a positive, better use. So they took it upon themselves to research government strategies and roadblocks and clinical trials that stood in the way of ACT UP wanted most, which was a cure. And this way they could focus their anger on these politicians and clinical studies and trials. They decided that their goal was to seize the FDA. ACT UP wanted the FDA to give AIDS patients access to an experimental drug, and the FDA wouldn't even think about it. So hundreds of activists charged the FDA's headquarters in Maryland. The group wore lab coats that were stained with bloody hands, and other people brought tombstones which they made and laid down in the streets under them. The activists advanced in rows and made the national news. Within days, the FDA finally agreed to meet, and in a couple months, they started opening up policy access to these drugs. Now, the two prongs of ACT UP's strategy were very important. The aggressive protests got the foot in the doors, but the homework that they did changed policies. What made this work was not just anger, it was anger coupled with intelligence. This could be a much longer video, but we don't have time to talk about ACT UP's whole history. We just need to know that this was an organization that started with anger and fear and hatred towards a government that didn't care about a disease that was killing people, much like America with COVID, and a group that used their anger towards policy change, and they took to the streets and made extreme protests and decisions, much like what's happening right now outside with the Black Lives Matter movement. It's kind of this mix between a group that tried to change the world, but nothing has really changed, it seems. Groups like this are just so important to our history as it changed the face of the world and it saved people's lives. So thank you ACT UP for your radicalized protests and picket lines, and thank you. Thank you all for watching today's video. If you liked it, make sure to subscribe down below. You can find all my social media links down there as well, and I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great night, everyone. Happy Pride.